Avatar: The Last Airbender has certainly amassed a massive fan base over the course of the past 15, 16, 17 years. Of course, that original animated series has really gone on to be regarded as one of the greatest animated series of all time, one of the most beloved, and similarly to Dune, this is not the first time that this source material has been adapted into live action. Director M. Night Shyamalan took a stab at developing a Last Airbender movie back in, I think that was 2010. That film came out. Pretty disastrous effort on the part of him. I would go as far as to say it probably nearly ended his career. It was that bad because nobody wanted anything to do with M. Night Shyamalan after that Last Airbender movie. It was just not great in any respect, really, especially considering that the animated series is so strong. Fast forward, kind of a generation later, and Netflix, picked up the rights to the series back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. They originally began developing the series with the original creators of the animated series, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. They were originally making this live action series with them, alongside them. Unfortunately, those two decided to drop out of the project around 2020 due to creative differences, and so Netflix decided to bring on a new partner to help bring this live action adaptation to life, and that is Albert Kim, who's sort of leading the charge here. They dropped all 8 episodes at the same time as Netflix traditionally does. And you and I, we have kind of two different relationships with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know you're a huge fan, or a watcher, and perhaps even a rewatcher of the animated series. I am very much a casual fan, and I've only just recently, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, really dove into the show to prepare for this and to really get a better understanding of this world and this universe. But with all of that out the way, man, I want to pass it over to you as we talk and unpack the show. What did you think about Netflix's take on Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Man, I was pretty worried to see, the original creators of the series leave at first. Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Canetto, because if you hear that, usually it's like the biggest red flag ever. You're like, who's leaving? The people that made it are leaving. What are we doing? Like, especially when you hear live action anything that's being adapted from a cartoon or an anime. I mean, everybody, I don't know anybody who's like, yes, a live action is coming. Like, nobody gets excited about that. And especially when you hear that the original creators are leaving, it's hard not to be a little skeptical of that, especially when the tagline is for creative differences. You're like, oh no, here we go. We've heard this too many times. We've had too many bad live actions coming out. What does that mean? And I'm actually pleasantly surprised by, I think, the product that we've gotten in this iteration of Avatar: The Last Airbender live action Netflix. I am very surprised in what we got. Is it perfect? No. I think the best word that I can use is fine. It's fine. And to be honest, it was easy again to be skeptical. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was afraid this thing would turn out pretty bad. Especially, I have PTSD for what M. Night Shyamalan did to the movie. I'm not even sure he ever watched an episode of Avatar in his life after watching that movie. But what this does feel like, even though the original creators left, it still feels like they left it in the hands of people who were fans of the TV show. And that was a pleasant surprise watching this. I think overall the casting was pretty good. Not all the performances worked for me, but the casting was pretty good. And there's been a ton of talk about the casting too. Of course, the story of Avatar and waterbenders is about, like, do we have native representation that we're supposed to, so on and so forth. But character by character, some characters worked for me and some characters didn't. To be honest, Uncle Iroh is a pretty big character in that animated series. Uncle Iroh, he was a mixed bag for me in this. I think the casting was good, but his performance seemed a little off. He was a little too happy, I think, up front of what Uncle Iroh was. Uncle Iroh did seem to be usually in good spirits, but he still did things in subtlety. He still did things where when you first meet him, you're like, okay, he may be again more on the nicer side of people within the Fire Nation, but he's still very much still Fire Nation. You felt that in him. And here is like, are you sure you Fire Nation? Are you sure there's Dragon of the West? Are you sure you used to be part of the White Look? Like, it didn't necessarily felt like the Uncle Iroh that I was looking for. And of course, things are going to change in an adaptation in live action, right? And I think they should, right? Things should change, storylines should change, and there were storylines that they did change here as well. And not all of them worked, but some of them did. Some stuff they changed, I was like, yeah, it makes sense why you changed it. And other things just simply didn't. And I think overall, it became a mixed bag for me. A couple other characters I want to point out as being perfect. I think Suki was perfect. The Kyoshi Island and love interest of Sokka, I think she was a pretty perfect casting. Honestly, one of the bigger roles here is Zuko. I thought did a tremendous job in what he was supposed to do. I thought Zuko knocked it kind of out of the park and who he's supposed to be as a character. When I say the casting isn't right, the performance isn't right, I'm talking about Azula and her friends. I did not feel it. They were really supposed to be like cute teenager Destiny's Child is who they're supposed to be, and they're not giving that energy. You know what I mean? Like the way they look, they're supposed to feel like again these badass popular girls, and they don't feel like that. They feel like, I don't know. It was just I wasn't really with Azula and her friends, and that's unfortunate because Azula is also a pretty important part of the show. But man, I wish I wish she was, yeah, I wish she felt different. And an important note, Azula doesn't even really appear in book one at all. We get her here, which this season one follows book one. We get her a decent amount, and so that's already a difference. And I thought it was going to be fine and welcome, which for the most part it is as a character beat. But again, as a performance, as a presence in the show, I didn't really like what was going on. One couple more character things. Sokka, good casting, even though I heard he lied about being like Native American or something. That's kind of weird. Good casting, but he is a very important comedic relief in the show. And though this show does a good job of making this more mature, which I like that about the show. It's not necessarily all things like the kiddie nature, because really Avatar is about these kids. They're tasked with saving the world, but they're young, and so they got ADHD, and they keep running into random shit throughout their journey to save the world. It's like Aang is like, "Hey guys, let's go see this big fish over here," and they're like, "Shit, okay." And that you don't really feel that in the show, and so but Sokka is usually the comedic relief, and here he just was not funny at all. I'm like, are you gonna throw a joke at us or anything? And he really doesn't. I think they could have still kept that in the show with the essence of Sokka. A couple more things. Set design was for the most part beautiful, and a lot of those things surprised me. I think they had some when you see certain villages, when you're in the Earth Kingdom, you kind of feel it. Some of those things look good, but sometimes you can feel the soundstage, and those are moments that really take you out of it. You're like, where did that come from? Because there's 1 second you're like, oh, the air temple looks beautiful, that looks really good, and then next second you're like, that doesn't look good. Like, how did we get there? And so I think sometimes that was back and forth with the way it looked, but for the most part, it looked pretty good. The bending, for the most part, was believable. I know that was a big worry of people. I was fine with it. I was fine with the bending. It looked okay. But yeah, man, overall, it's a mixed bag. Uh, some character choices didn't all the way work. Aang wasn't focused on water bending in the book one like he really was in that first season, which in the animated series, which kind of took me out a little bit. But I think overall, this really surprised me as one of the better live action adaptations that we've gotten out of Netflix. And again, it's not great, but I think it did what it needed to do to propel us to what could be book two and season two of this show. And I think it has enough views to do that. I think they'll greenlight season two if they haven't already at some point. But I think they have an opportunity to take the things from season one that weren't that great and to turn them up in season two. And another interesting thing is there's a lot of times in the show where you're like, yeah, that's why that was animation. That's why we kept that animated and everything wasn't translated how it feels like it should have been translated, because some things just don't work in live action, y'all. Like, there's a reason animation is a medium, and we can do those whimsical and fun things in animation that we can't do in live action, which is why our ears always perk up when it's like live action. I don't know. It's not necessarily we don't always need it. So yeah, man. Overall, just a mixed bag, but I am impressed. Overall, I think with what we got compared to I think what my expectations were.
That's interesting to hear because as somebody who's not as closely connected with it as I think a lot of other fans are out there, as you are yourself, I was curious to see how I would react to it. As I have seen a good amount of the animated show, I'm still working my way through it, but I'm heading towards book 3 very soon here, and I was curious to see how I would react to the the live action show, especially considering it's mostly focusing on that first season, on that first book. And after watching it and thinking about just all the conversations around it and just everything that's come out of really just the whole discourse around this show, I think I do feel similar that it's okay. It's certainly not a train wreck, and it could have
Hmm.
been way worse, as we have already seen previously done before. There are still a lot of issues inherently, and I do want to circle back to that. But I think on the positive side of things, I mean, it's clear that they put the money and the resources behind this. I think you look at this as a television show. You can see the production value in most of the spots. There are a couple of sequences and scenes I noticed similar things in terms of, oh yeah, this clearly is a backlot or a soundstage. Some of the CGI is a little shoddy at particular
Hmm.
points. It doesn't always work, but for the most part, they kind of make it look to the level of what you would expect it to look from a premium service like Netflix, knowing that they're going to put a lot of money and resources behind this. So I got to give them credit for that, and the production design and the costumes, and really trying to build out this world, because it's a truly expansive, imaginative world that they've built out here with this whole franchise and this whole mythos. And so a lot of that stuff was really, really impressive. And I was kind of looking at it like, wow, okay, this looks really good. It looks the part. And then in addition to that, I do think that the majority of the performances worked for me, although I think what doesn't work isn't necessarily the performances, but also like how some of the real estate is sort of utilized in terms of the story. Because I think
Hmm.
one of the biggest issues in examining this whole experiment, this adaptation, is just the nature of it. The fact that they are adapting what was an animated series that had 20 episode seasons at about 23 minutes apiece, and they're now condensing that story down into 8 episodes, which are about 50 minutes long. Now if you do the math, technically it's not that far off. Like we're probably like 40 minutes off, maybe
Yeah.
40 minutes shaved off from the animated series, but it is totally different just because of the pacing and the style, because they do introduce a lot of elements in this first season that aren't as prominent in the animated series first season, and some
Hmm.
characters that don't have as much screen time or as much of a presence. And they do introduce even more action very early up front, so it changes the entire flow of the show and how things pace out. They even condense some other elements down, certain worlds or places that they build or characters that they meet kind of get condensed down into one thing, so it changes inherently your viewing experience. And it does at times for me, as somebody who recently rewatched the first season. At times I kind of felt like, wait, I don't even remember that happening, like, at all. Where did this come from? Is
Hmm.
this new, or is this like a remix of something that I've seen and I'm just not picking up on it? So at times I was a little bit more concerned about what was there or what wasn't there previously, and that often
Yeah.
left me a little
Hmm.
kind of confounded sometimes at the experience. And I think some people might have a similar viewing experiences, which is not the thing you want to do when you're adapting something. You want people solely focused on the product at hand, what they're watching in that particular moment. But they do exceed it a lot. I think that the ability to translate some of the big action is done really well. Some of the dramatic beats that they're able to translate work a lot for me. I think I agree with you about Uncle Iroh. Like, he doesn't always feel, I think, the level of the gravitas that you need to feel with the association with the Fire Nation. I do think that him and Zuko together in the show worked
Hmm.
well on screen
Yeah.
together, because they benefited a lot from more screen time. They clearly got a lot more to do compared to what we saw in that
Hmm.
opening book from the animated show. Conversely, though, that took away time from like that main trio from Aang, Katara, and Sokka. I think that there's a little bit left to be desired from their relationship and their dynamic. They kind of pull back the focus from them, and maybe that's
Hmm.
because they're already so well established in the animated series. Maybe they felt like, oh, they're already beloved. We don't have to do a ton because like people know who they are. So let's focus
Mm.
on other characters. I don't know if that's the thinking. If that was, I'm not sure if I would have made that decision, but that's just like me
Hmm.
trying to rationalize, maybe the thought process, because that core three is very, very integral, and we don't get as much of the silliness from Aang in this show really at all. Like, he is a
Yeah.
very silly character, as you mentioned, very much has a short attention span and does crazy shit. And we don't really get a lot of that. This is a much more emotional take, a much more heavy take, which, sometimes is a little confusing. Like, would this boy really be that concerned with all of this? Like, would he really
Mm-hmm.
be that responsible in this moment? I don't know. So certain things, more so after watching this, just leave me thinking like, man, I don't always know how to feel. I just know that it wasn't terrible, but I know it doesn't necessarily reach the potential of what it could be. But I still
Right.
thought it was fine. I still thought it was cool. Like,
Exactly.
I don't
That's
regret
it.
I don't regret watching it. I think that they did an okay job. And perhaps this is the case too. From what I've heard and what I've kind of experienced, like, book one in Avatar, The Last Airbender, the animated series, it starts off slow. Like, it's actually
Yeah.
taken me a long time to like really get into it, because like those first few episodes, like nothing really happens. It's like, yo, where are we
Mm-hmm.
going here? But then when stuff picks up, it never stops. It just goes and goes and goes.
Oh man, Buck 2 was cooking
Yeah,
with
it
grease.
just gets ridiculous, and it's like, yo,
Yeah.
where was this entire time? And I think we might just kind of be in a similar situation here, where if
Mm-hmm.
they can just take everything that they learned from this season and just apply it and plus it and really double down on the stuff that works, and maybe listen to some of the criticism that they're getting, book two, season two, whenever they do get to it, could potentially match those highs, or at least get pretty close, and I think maybe satisfy even more people. But I think a lot of the conversation, a lot of the problems, which are some of my own problems, is just the nature of the format. Condensing down what they did in animated style to 8 episodes, it doesn't always translate. And I think that you have to kill a lot of your darlings, which are unfortunate. And sometimes things felt a little bit rushed, and we were kind of getting to places a little too quickly for my liking. Like, man, maybe we can just settle here a little bit more, and take the time that we
Mm-hmm.
need to make this feel as important as it should, because I don't know if we always felt that. One other thing that I do want to ask you is just, again, sort of related to that point, about the nature of adaptations really in general, because we have seen this a lot with Netflix lately. They recently adapted One Piece, and that was super
Mm-hmm.
successful. Did
It
have its
was.
critics though. Last Airbender, similar situation. Other anime or animated shows that they
Mm-hmm.
have developed into live action, and I think that there's this method of thinking, in Hollywood, and probably to a large part of the audience, that animation, and Guillermo del Toro has talked about this, that animation is a lesser form, or that it's merely for kids, or when you're translating something into live action, that you're classing it up, you're giving it more, it's more mature. Like, there's all of these things that are out there, this discourse that's out there, and I'm not saying any of that's true, because I don't believe any of that stuff, but that is a part of the conversation, that
Mm-hmm.
animation, or excuse me, that live action is a higher quote unquote form of entertainment maybe than animation to some people. And that's why they do these to begin with. What do you think about that? The fact that, the animated series, it's kind of perfect, for a lot of people. So like,
Yeah.
what's really the need to do this? Like, if we're really if we're really adapting something that's already like been done so well, like, why bring it to live action? What do you think about some of the motivations there? Like, why we kind of keep coming back to some of these properties that were executed so well in one medium, but for whatever reason, whether it's fan demand or just studios wanting, more subscribers and new eyeballs, Netflix probably saw how the animated series was doing. They were like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
fuck, this is going crazy. Let's make a live action show. Give them more. What do you think about just that whole conversation, between animation and then things that, get translated to live action?
Man, I think there's so much to it, man, because it's always been so weird because there's always examples of good live actions that are made, even though we didn't necessarily ask for it. You know what I mean? Even though we weren't necessarily looking in that direction. Sometimes a movie comes along or a TV show comes along that's adapting animation as live action. And we'll go, huh, that was okay. Like, that was all right. And part of me does think it's I don't know if lazy way is the word to put it, but it definitely feels like a cash grab. It definitely feels like, how can we recycle fans, old fans, and get some new fans on old property and old IP, and that definitely feels like similar. Let's say that happens to something like One Piece, right? One of the biggest anime ever, one of the biggest mangas, one of the most mangas has been sold of all time. Netflix was like, I mean, Make a live action. Guess how many people will watch that? Lo and behold, a lot of people watched it. Fortunately, it got really positive reviews, but that's not always the case. But I think there is something there to get people's attention, to get views, to grab views, and to get people to watch certain things. And that's what it's always felt like. It's not, very rarely have we seen them adapt something that doesn't feel like it's meaningful for people. I mean, people, they're coming out with, I mean, Cowboy Bebop, these are all anime classics. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a American cartoon classic. You know what I mean? And so these are literally, I think, opportunities to make money, and that's the way they see it. And unfortunately, the love and the care that went into the animation isn't always the love and the care that goes into the live action, or the thing that made the animation so cool in the first place is not always going to translate well to the live action. It just doesn't always work like that. And so that's how I've been looking at it recently, man. Like every time we're like, it's so funny. Every time a live action gets announced, everybody rolls their eyes. Like, again, it's been very seldom have I seen anybody go, yes, a live action for that's being made. I have never. I mean, Disney's in the same camp right now, right? They're making Cinderella and Maleficent, and
those are even worse offenders, because a lot of those movies are like one for one remakes of the animated original classics.
They're not even doing new things.
It's not an adaptation. It's just a retelling.
It's just a retelling. But again, in that same vein, they get lucky sometimes. Cinderella 2015, I think that's a good live action adapt, or you know what I mean, retelling of. I was like, oh, this movie is cool. But the first Maleficent, this movie is cool, but it's not. And then abominations happen. You get Mulan, you get Lion King, you get you get these other movies that's like, okay, what are we doing here? And it's all a money grab, it's all a cash grab. Again, it's been very seldom where somebody's making live action for the art medium to bring it to higher level of whatever people were saying, to bring it to that next level of what they're talking about. It almost ends up being the opposite. Oh my God, that was worse. Oh my God, that was worse. Oh my God, that was worse. And so that narrative has to die. It needs to die. Some animation is some of the most crazy and mature things you will ever watch. I guarantee you, especially from the depths of anime. Come on, man. Attack on Titan will make you like the saddest person on earth because it's dark. It's dark and very mature, and people are getting eaten. You know what I'm saying? Like it really is. It really does feel like that. So yeah, man, it's all a cash grab to me at the end of the day. And the conversation around maybe it elevates it or makes it more mature because it's live action, it has to stop, because there is maturity in animation as well. And even Avatar has some of the craziest, even though it still appeals to kids for sure, but it has some of the craziest and scariest moments in that show, especially when you see Katara bloodbend. When you get to Legend of Korra, you'll see some crazy people, airbender sucking out air out of people's lungs, ridiculous things. There are mature things that happen in animation, and so that's a narrative that must stop.
It's a level of ignorance that I think is just on the part of a lot of executives and even, some audience members, even though that's becoming far and fewer in between. I think on the part of the audience, like there are huge audiences for anime at this point in time. Like we've seen just the massive growth in popularity. So like people watching that stuff knows, like they know exactly like what they're getting. They know that, they're getting quality stories that certainly can hold their own to the best of the best, in live action. But a lot of it just does come down to the numbers and the dollar signs. And what makes it all so strange is that you can go on Netflix and one click away, Avatar: The Last Airbender from Nickelodeon, it's right there. Like it's literally right there. Just click on it and watch it, y'all. Like you ain't got to go far. It's on Netflix already. And here they are, a few short years later, like let's do it again, but just make it live action. And 9 times out of 10, I think we've seen the results. It's going to be a lesser version. Can it still be good? Probably so. Are they going to make changes? Absolutely, as we've seen. But is it going to match the heights of what that original series achieved for most fans? More often than not, that's not going to be a reality, I think, for most people. So it's always just so interesting. But it is largely just driven by business and the prospect of increasing subscribers and viewership and numbers and merchandise opportunities and whatever the case may be, which I get it. It's Hollywood. It's a business at the end of the day. You know, it ain't show friends, it's show business. But when you have something that is just like so intrinsically tied to a generation that's worked and has worked well, and even newer generations are discovering it. It's not like these younger generations aren't watching Avatar The Last Airbender because it came out 15 years ago. Like they're watching that stuff. Just like young girls and boys are watching old Disney animated movies. They're watching the original Lion King. I would love to get 20 kids, young kids in a room, 5 and under, and ask them, hey,
Mhm.
have you seen The Lion King? Yes. Which one did you watch? Wait, there's more than one? I would love to see what that fucking conversation would look like, because I guarantee you they're probably watching the animated version, not the damn 2019 live action one. So it's just
Mhm.
always so interesting when they assume the things that we want as audience members, and that doesn't always align, even though, you know, we kind of tell them that it does when we watch the stuff and they get 21 something million viewers in the first 4 days. That's us basically telling them, like, yeah, we want more, when it's like,
Exactly.
actually, I'm
Yep.
just kind of curious. I just want to see what you did, but that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean I want more of this thing, because like that animated version
Yeah.
is already like really good. So
It's tricky.
it's always going to be, I think, a conflict that's at odds. The creativity versus the commerce of Hollywood. That's just kind of the nature of things. But it's really interesting now with like Netflix and just all the stuff that they're doing with these live action adaptations. But we'll see. We'll see if they get the green light for season 2, which they likely will, and maybe potentially with other future projects they have coming down the pipeline. I know they're doing.
Oh, they got a lot.
They got My Hero Academia coming, if I'm not mistaken. They got other stuff coming, I think, that they're doing. So
Oh,
they
I was talking about Avatar Studios. That's what I was talking
Oh, Avatar.
about.
Oh, then they also have a lot too. Yes,
They
they
cooking right
yeah,
now. Yeah.
they're working on some big stuff. The original creators are tied to some other new
Mhm.
projects that are coming. So yeah, there will be some additional stories in that universe coming from them. So I'm sure that people attached to that universe, that particular side of things, will certainly get fed soon enough here. So we will certainly have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new live action adaptation of Avatar The Last Airbender. If you've checked out all 8 episodes on Netflix, hit us up and let us know what you think.